Welcome to today's webinar, Neighbour or Foe, where we discuss the ways to resolve neighbour disputes. This webinar is part of the Law Awareness Weeks at CDC 2022. It is a collaboration between Law Society Pro Bono Services, the 5 Community Development Councils, National Universities Singapore, Faculty of Law, Singapore University of Social Sciences School of Law, Singapore Management University School of Law, and the Singapore Corporate Counsel Association Pro Bono Chapter, and supported by the People's Association. My name is Kellyn, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, there are 2 housekeeping matters that we'd like you to take note of. The first is about Q&A. Today, we'll be using Pigeonhole Live, and you can submit your questions at any point in time during this webinar, and we will try our best to answer your questions throughout the webinar. You can also vote on the questions asked by others that you would like to get answered during this webinar. So if you have a smartphone or a tablet with you, you can launch your internet browser and enter www.pigeonhole.at and enter the passcode that you see on the screen, LawCDC08. So that's LAWCDC08. You can also click on the link that's being shared in the chat function right now to launch Pigeonhole Live on your device. And if you're viewing this webinar on your desktop or laptop, you should receive an invitation for you to launch Pigeonhole. So the second point is, please note that today's webinar is not intended to substitute any form of professional legal advice. So if you require any specific legal advice, please consult a lawyer. So with that, I'm very, very happy to introduce our distinguished panelists for today's webinar, Ms. Gloria James, as well as Ms. Katherine Yap. Ms. Gloria James has been a practicing lawyer since 1996 and has gained considerable experience and knowledge in diverse areas of law pertaining to family law, criminal law, civil law, and estate law. In 2011, Gloria attained certification in mediating disputes from the Harvard Mediation Program under the guidance of Professor Robert Mukin. She also trained with Regent's University of London under the guidance of Paul Randall in the area of mediation coupled with psychotherapy and psychology. In 2015, Gloria underwent an intensive 40-hour family mediation workshop jointly organized by the Singapore Mediation Centre and Ericsson Mediation Institute. She was accredited as a family mediator in the Singapore Mediation Centre and Family Justice Courts of Singapore. With this training, she's capable of managing high conflict personalities in an intensive, emotional, and volatile background. She's also able to empathize with and provide emotional support to clients. Ms. Katherine Yap was one of the pioneer visionaries who spearheaded the establishment of Maxwell Chambers in Singapore. She also championed the expansion of Maxwell Chambers' new building premise, Maxwell Chambers, through the co-founding of the Maxwell Chambers Suites in August 2019. And Katherine also jointly led Maxwell Chambers through the co-founding of the IACA, which is the International Arbitration Centre Alliance, and advocating the use of virtual and hybrid alternative dispute resolution hearings globally. And forefronting all facets of the business, Katherine has over 13 years of experience driving sales growth, leading transformation, and advocating innovation in the alternative dispute resolution arena. Her tenacity has attributed to the successful advancement and stronghold that Maxwell Chambers continues to hold across the ADR landscape. Katherine further adds to a comprehensive portfolio in the ADR landscape through her certification as an associate mediator at the Singapore Mediation Centre, master mediator for the Community Mediation Centre, and mediator for the Singapore International Mediation Institution. She's also on the panel of mediators with Beihai Asia International Arbitration Centre and executive committee of the Society of Mediation Professionals. She has over 9 years of experience in mediation and actively presides over mediation cases with the CDC. Katherine and Gloria, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
It's my pleasure to be here with two very experienced mediators to discuss the ways in which we can better resolve disputes between neighbours. So you're most likely here because you're currently experiencing a dispute with your neighbor, or because you know somebody who is facing such a dispute. It could be that your neighbor next door likes to sing karaoke till very late in the night. Your neighbor below you likes to smoke or has been smoking, and the odor enters into your house. Or it could be your neighbor above you who hangs their wet laundry dripping onto yours at various times of the day. So these can all cause nuisance and annoyance. You may have tried to resolve the matter by speaking with your neighbor directly, by reaching out to your town council if you stay in HDB, or your MCST if you live in a condo. You may also have tried speaking to your MP in your constituency, or even making a police report, but sometimes these can be to no avail. So today we'll explore other ways to resolve neighbourly disputes with a focus on mediation and other legal avenues such as commencing a claim in court. So I think it'll be helpful if both Katherine and Gloria can give our audience a broad overview about what mediation is and what the process entails, as well as go through the legal options available before we deep dive into a few examples of neighbor disputes and specific issues that may arise from these examples. And I'm sure both of you will have many anecdotes to share based on your many years of experience. Of course, we'll do so anonymously. Yeah, and as your experience as mediator as well as legal counsel. So perhaps to kickstart today's discussion, Katherine, could you briefly share with us what mediation is and how it may be useful in resolving disputes concerning neighbours?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Katherine. Mediation is a process where a neutral person, that is the mediator, facilitates discussion between parties who are in a dispute in an effort to reach a mutually acceptable solution. So mediation becomes very useful in situations where a dispute arises due to misunderstanding or lack of understanding of each other's difficulty or preferences, or simply non-communications. In high-rise, high-density Singapore, some friction is unavoidable. So this is especially for neighbours who live in close proximity to each other. Now, neighbours may not always be so open to approaching one another, or may have tried but failed to improve the situation. So this is where the third party, the mediator, will come in to assist, and this will be very helpful for both parties.
Sure. Perhaps later we'll go into the specific process of mediation, but could you just give us maybe a general idea, if parties were to face or neighbours were to face some kind of dispute, where can they go for mediation for such dispute?
There is Community Mediation Centre. You just have to pay a fee of $5, and you will be able to watch your case with Community Mediation Centre. So it's as simple as that. Yeah.
And based on your experience as a mediator for many years, would you say that mediation is useful in helping neighbours resolve such disputes?
Certainly, definitely, it is a very useful tool when both parties is not in talking terms anymore, and they really truly need a third party to come in to try to play that middleman. Neutral party impartiality will come into place as well to ensure that we will listen to both sides of the story and see how we are able to help them explore solutions to better settle whatever disagreement that they have.
Sure. Gloria, what do you think? Given your experience as not only a mediator, but also as legal counsel for parties, would you also agree that mediation would be a suitable manner to resolve disputes between neighbours?
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, so I would suggest that any matters that come before you as a lawyer, what I do is to recommend, have you tried resolving this matter amicably? And when they ask me what's my alternatives, what do I have? So that's when I always suggest that please look for mediation. It could be mediation at a centre, or it could even be a private mediation.
Could you give us some context on how private mediation would take place? Because Katherine mentioned about, you can go to the CMC, pay $5 to commence a claim, but how about private mediation?
Private mediation, you can approach any mediation centres. You have the Singapore Mediation Centres, or the Law Society Mediation Scheme, or you can even approach any private mediators. And with these options available, all you have to do is just work towards, what will be a reasonable costing that you can afford. And with that, you'll be able to make some choices.
Sure. I think many people who have neighbor disputes might ask, or they might think that, okay, if I have a dispute, how can I sue? The first thing they would think is, how can I sue, without maybe considering mediation as an option. So could you maybe just give us a brief, maybe like understanding about what's the difference between commencing a claim and doing mediation?
Yeah. So if the client comes with such an issue, so what I usually do is explain to them the process that is available for them. I would tell them, look, maybe if you're very keen to settle this dispute, perhaps keep, litigation away. Yeah. So what you can do is, as a lawyer, what I can do for you is basically set up your, what are the issues you have, send what we call a polite letter of demand. Yeah. So basically saying, look, let's talk about this. Are you able to, maybe sit down and have a discussion with me? Or maybe are you able to perhaps, I give you a few days, think about this, what I've just proposed, and come back to me. So basically, with this approach, you're trying to keep litigation away. Yeah. And giving them an alternative, look, I do have an issue. Please try to listen to what I have to say, and perhaps you can come to some resolution.
Sure. I think one point that you mentioned is very interesting. Neighbor disputes might be a bit different from other types of disputes in that you kind of have to continue living close to your neighbor. It is your living circumstances, not so easily change in a sense. So perhaps mediation would be good, like what Katherine mentioned, when there's misunderstanding or even non-communication, and that can help you bridge that gap. Perhaps we can go back to Katherine. Just like you mentioned, there are many mediations that we can do for neighbor disputes at the CMC. What are some types, or the common types of disputes that you see at the CMC?
We saw quite a bit of disputes. We have the neighbors dispute, dispute between family members, dispute between friends, co-workers, as well as landlords and tenants or co-tenants. So, but one of the most common cause of disputes is noise nuisance. So in 2021, noise, unacceptable conduct, and nuisance from cigarette smoke were the three most common type of neighbor disputes registered at CMC. So you do have neighbors who are smoking along the corridor, and you have children that's running around the corridor. So those are the common disputes that you hear. One of the more common ones will be, neighbors living above them or below them, water dripping from their clothing when they hang out the clothing to dry, or even noise. They always hear marbles falling on the floor. So these are all very common situations that we get to hear over at the Mediation Centre.
I see. And so just now you mentioned noise disturbance, and would there be also harassment or damage to property? I know a common cause would probably be the use of common corridor.
Yes.
Where people kind of have quite a number of issues with that.
Yes. So you have quite a number of neighbors who complain that I do have disputants coming in with a big file of newspaper clippings about their case being broadcast already in a manner. So this was a case whereby there were a lot of plants that out along the corridor, which makes it very difficult for the other neighbors to walk to get to the living room. So things like that are pretty common. Sometimes they do get very aggressive, but what you need to do as a mediator is to calm the situation down, because you will definitely expect emotions to run and people are agitated, especially if they have not spoken for the longest time. And just before they came for the mediation, they are still slamming off gates and all that. So you need to understand that these people have issues already when they are before you. So you need to be very calm and listen to their sides of the stories with equal time given to each party.
Sure. Perhaps, Katherine, from your experience, what is the success rate of mediation? Because some people might think that, mediations don't work. If I've tried to reach out to my neighbor, we can't seem to talk things out. Why would mediation work? So could you share, based on your experience, the success rate, and maybe after that we can go to Gloria, who can share the same?
Well, I think success rate is pretty high for CMC. We always try to get both parties to explore options because the decision is entirely on the parties themselves. It's not the mediator. The mediator is there to facilitate, to encourage, to explore all the various options that we can think of. So it is just like, we are like a village head, whereby you have the residents, having their own disputes, and we just have to be there to facilitate all the discussions that they have and all the underlying issues, because most of the time, there is always the underlying issues that cause the dispute to snowball to such a stage that it is beyond repair, it is beyond communal between both of them already. So we need the third party to come in to settle their disputes. But of course, totally empowering the parties that they have all the rights to explore all the various solutions. So if you ask me, I think for those mediation cases that I have settled, I think I do have about 97% kind of closure rate, so it's not too bad.
That is great.
Yeah, but it's not possible to get a 100% closure rate for mediation. Okay, I think that would be amazing mediator, but to me, I do see some dispute that has not been resolved. It cannot be resolved, and they need time to think about it before they come back again. We do have that as well. So what CMC provides is you can remediate after 3 months. If within 3 months, sorry. So if you from the last mediation session, so you can ask for another remediation with no extra charge. So you pay $5, and then you see 3 months what happens. And then if you still feel that it did not resolve, situation is still not quite right, you may actually ask for another remediation.
Oh, okay. That's very nice to know.
Gloria, how about yourself? Of course, we're not competing here. We're not saying you don't have to tell us your percentage rate personally, but just based on your experience, I mean, do you what do you think of the success rate of mediation?
I mean, just thinking on what Katherine was saying, success rate is quite high. Yeah. So basically, any cases that come to mediation in the state courts, the time spent by the mediator could take anywhere from a couple of hours to half a day. So there is a dedicated time slot given to you, and you should make ample use of it. So what I'm seeing is, of course, many cases that come there tend to get settled, because when you're looking at neighbor disputes, at the end of the day, the magic word is what kind of harmony. You're looking at harmony, and can we continue living together, as neighbors? And sometimes some of these neighbors, when they come, they feel that the mediation gives them an avenue to vent out their frustrations, and they probably want the neighbor to hear, this is what I have to say. Yeah, and that's why I find that the chances of having the matters resolved at mediation, it's very high. Unlike Katherine, I didn't do the numbers.
Trying to keep track.
I mean, that sounds all well and good, right? But some of our participants in this webinar, they're very keen to know, what if their neighbor refuses to participate in mediation? Because as we know, mediation is a voluntary process. Gloria, what do you think? You mentioned just now that you would try to send a letter, a polite letter. Would that also kind of include a request for mediation?
Yes, definitely. So you're giving them options. Yeah. So you're telling them, look, I would like to resolve this dispute with you. Are we able to consider private mediation, or perhaps take the free mediation services that at the Community Mediation Centre could offer?
I think as an extension to that, some participants have asked whether mediation can be made compulsory. I understand that if you go through the court process, the court also would encourage parties to go through mediation. Would you say that in that sense, it would almost be compulsory or not really?
I would say it is viewed as if it's mandatory. Yeah. So even if you fail at CMC, and when you launch your actual claim with the state courts, you are made to go through another round of mediation. So that's why I say that the chances of settling the matter at mediation is absolutely high.
I see. Katherine, how about from your experience? Will CMC be able to do anything to help the neighbors or a party who does not want to, or who wants mediation, will CMC be able to help that party reach out to their neighbor to suggest or encourage them to participate in mediation?
Well, I think CMC staff are given the training to be able to talk to the disputants or to fix an appointment. So I think they don't just try once, they try a couple of times from what I heard from my engagement with the staff. So they will try to convince, but if nothing comes out of it, you can't force them. We must always remember mediation is voluntary. So you can't force the parties to come for mediation if they are already at the very beginning, they refuse to do so. We do have occasions whereby the parties refuse to turn up as well, or they said yes to it, but they didn't want to turn up. In fact, we had one mediation case where my partner, my mediator partner, actually called the disputant because he said yes for the mediation, but he did not turn up. So we waited about an hour and we spoke with him. We said that you have already said yes to us. So the other party is also here already. So I think it's only courtesy that you turn up, right? So he turned up. So we had a mediation session for that day.
I see. I think later on we'll explore some other options available if parties fail at mediation or if they refuse to attend mediation. But perhaps for now, let's explore a little bit more about mediation. Katherine, could you just describe to us maybe the process of mediation?
Okay, the process is the mediator will start with his or her opening statement. So that's when she introduced herself or himself, that she is only a facilitator, a neutral party that will facilitate the discussion that is ongoing. Then we will go to hear the party's side of the story. So we try to usually go with the person who filed the report, and then subsequently given the same time for the other party to say or to tell us her side of the story. Then we will have a joint session where we will try to explore various solutions totally from both parties. We encourage parties to come up with some solutions, you know, how they view this situation and how they can help to mitigate, you know, the other parties' requests. So this is the stage whereby this is quite interactive. You know, both parties will start talking, and sometimes you will get very upset party that will dwell their stories again and again. So as a mediator, we try to move the parties forward, and then we will give the focus on the next party for them to review what they have got to say. Then, if need be, we will have to break for private caucus. That's when the mediators get an opportunity to have a private chat with the disputant one-on-one. But of course, this is totally done in a private and confidential setting. So whatever that is being mentioned to us in that room stays in that room, unless they are willing to share a certain portion of what have discussed during the private caucus with the other parties. So as a mediator, then we will have to, we kind of, because due to experience, right? So we kind of know exactly what will help the other party understand a bit deeper. So we will always ask for permission. If let's say the disputant say yes, then we review. If not, it stays in that room and it's not supposed to be shared. So we emphasize a lot of private confidentiality. Then we will come back once we sort of like talk to both parties already. We will come back again for another joint session, and that's when we will dive deeper into the solutions that's provided by both parties. Usually by then, the private caucus ended, you would have known exactly what's going on, and how you go back to the joint session and kind of get deeper into the discussion and the solutions. And then we will then have the closure, whereby an agreement will be signed upon by both parties that they agree on certain solutions. And this has got to be carried out because whatever that is written there is binding. Yeah. So the parties will know that they will have to abide by whatever that has been.
Sure. Gloria, do people need to
Engage a lawyer for mediation?
not for neighbor disputes? You can't engage a lawyer. But if you fail at CMC stage, and if you feel that you need to proceed further with your claim, what you have to do is to basically file your claim, and you can also make a request for a lawyer to be appointed, and that is subject to court.
See, but technically they can engage a lawyer to advise them, even though
Yes.
they may not be represented
Yeah.
by a lawyer during the CMC.
Yeah, so
during
if
the
they
mediation
if they have doubts as to how they're going to set up the form, what kind of category the claims fall under. So basically what you can do is to go see a lawyer and do your online filing with the lawyer.
Sure. Katherine, just now you mentioned that parties will sign an agreement, or when they come to a settlement and, on the terms and stuff like that. And this agreement is binding. But I mean, as with, I'm sure in both, in your experience, there will be many people who breach the agreement subsequently. How would people go ahead to enforce this agreement subsequently? Or what can they do if they realize that the neighbor has breached this agreement during the mediation that was made during the mediation?
Oh, okay. So if it's an agreement made at the state courts itself, so basically you have an order, yeah. And so if you breach that order, you can then go ahead and enforce it. But if you have an agreement, and what you can do is to basically file a complaint that this person has breached the agreement. So if in doubt, we'll look for a lawyer to give you this step-by-step advice.
And I think some of our participants might be wondering if maybe English may not be their main language, or maybe their neighbor may be their mother tongue might be a different language. In that case, will mediation or will CMC be able to help with this, Katherine?
Yes, CMC will definitely be able to help for disputants who has a certain language that we want to converse during the mediation session. So if it's a Chinese speaking one, then they will arrange for a mediator who understands Mandarin, who speaks Mandarin fluently, to be that mediator or that co-mediator. So be rest assured. For me, I'm quite lost in Mandarin, but I can understand. But I think my dialect, my dialect helps me a lot better. So we do have disputants, neighbor disputes with older generation speaking in Hokkien. So I'm able to converse in Hokkien. So sometimes being able to speak that language helps as well, because sometimes they thought that the translation will go will not be exactly how they portray it, but to have a mediator who is able to relate to the same language, the same dialect would help greatly.
Okay. Yeah. How about Gloria? How about yourself? Do you have any experience specific to languages or bridging issues with language?
So I had one particular occasion, I would often say one, maybe a few occasions, when the disputants come to the room, and then they look at me and say, I prefer to speak in Chinese. But you might have a situation where an interpreter was not, arranged for. So I don't want to make it as a wasted trip for the party. So I say, would you be comfortable if I just speak in Mandarin? I can't speak any other dialects, but I'll make an effort to speak in Mandarin, and they were happy with that. So I would say that, if they were happy that the mediator was able to go that extra mile.
Sure. And I mean, I think it's great that you can speak Mandarin and you offered that on the table.
Just being lucky with
Yeah, but from what I understand, it's great because CMC would be able to arrange for for an interpreter if parties require, and as long as you request for one. So I think it is very heartening for people to know that there is this option available to bridge that communication if needed. Yeah. So I think there was a question by one of the participants asking about who would pay the mediation fee or the cost of mediation. So Katherine, you mentioned that it's $5 at the CMC.
Yes, it is.
So the question is, who would be paying this amount of money?
Usually the person who filed for the case pays for that money. Yeah, pays for the admin fee of $5.
So the person who requests
For a mediation session to be conducted would be the person who pays for $5.
Okay, and assuming that the other side agrees to the mediation, Gloria, perhaps you could chime in on how you think parties should prepare for a mediation. So just now we understood from Katherine the process of it.
Yes.
How you will have a joint session and parties would have individual sessions potentially with the mediator to kind of state their case. Then you may go back to a joint session again. And in that sense, how would a potential party to the mediation how should they properly prepare themselves for this mediation session so that it can be more successful?
Okay. Perhaps, firstly, they ought to know that of course, they can approach a lawyer for help. And since, assuming they come to me, what happens is I'll just go through with them, explain to them, look, based on the claim that you have filed, so this is what you need to show. So if you have a claim about excessive noise, so what evidence do you have? So they can show me what we have. Maybe there's a recording, or maybe they send a text message to the neighbor saying, hey, I've asked you to stop several times here. And the neighbors probably would have said, yes, I would do so, but didn't do so. Yeah. So these are some of the evidence that the claimant would use. And if they have any other witnesses with them, when the noise has happened and all that, they could also submit their witness statements by way of a statutory declaration. So basically, they can do their evidence gathering. And I must say that the state courts, the website, judiciary website, have a lot of helpful resources. That's something they could rely on how to make the claims. And yeah, so I would say that there's a lot of literature that
Sure. I think there is a question quite specific about how do you prove or how do you gather certain evidence, maybe in a case of a noise disturbance. So this example is that your neighbor above has been, making noise, maybe moving furniture in the middle of the night. How would you, how is it possible to gather that evidence, given that if your neighbor were to say that no, they deny and say this is not them, they have not been making this noise. So based on perhaps both your experience, Katherine, if you have any specific experience, please chime in on how you have seen maybe certain disputants gather their evidence to help their case.
Well, we do have quite a number of disputants bringing their handphones in with video recording or photographs the issues that they are facing, or especially like if the corridor is crowded with plants, they take photos and all that. But bear in mind, as a mediator, a neutral party, we are not here to judge anyone else. So when they are most willing to present their evidence, what I usually will do will ask the other party whether are they comfortable with the other party presenting the evidence. If the other party say, yeah, let's see what evidence do they have. Because I think this is also their first time viewing all the videos that they are being captured, so to speak. When both parties has given their approval, then I think, yeah, you can have a look at the evidence. But if let's say that there's one party who's uncomfortable looking into it, then I would think that the other parties will have to respect the other party on why he or she doesn't want to view the video recording, because it could be something very sensitive that he or she doesn't want it to be like open and shown to anyone else. So we have to respect the parties. So we have to bear in mind that we have to take care of either both parties' interests as well.
I mean, taking on Katherine's point on that, when parties have an agreement, they can even give an undertaking that they will, perhaps destroy this evidence, moving forward, since they already have an agreement. Because the last thing you need is for this video to appear on social media.
Well, I think that's a very interesting point. I think one of the participants also asked, just now we mentioned that there is a settlement agreement. If parties come to a settlement agreement during CMC, can this be made into a court order or in some kind of way? Perhaps Gloria, you can.
Not for CMC matters, because it's basically an agreement, unless the matter is filed as a court.
I see. So if parties do not abide by that agreement reached at CMC, what alternatives would they have?
Then you file it as a complaint to say that the party has breached the agreement.
I see. Okay. So in that sense, they will still have to take the legal route to commence the claim.
Yes.
Okay, I see. But just now we mentioned earlier, based on both your experience, mediation has resulted in many successful cases. So perhaps the part where you have to, those people who fail at mediation and would have to move on to commence a claim, would you say that that would be a smaller number?
I would say a smaller number. Yeah.
Okay.
And usually, even if you have a breach of an agreement situation, what we normally recommend is reach out to your neighbors again, maybe use the lawyers to write a letter and say, hey, can we do something about this? Can we talk about this or mediate this again?
Sure. And I think now would be an appropriate time for us to perhaps move to look at what are the options available if a mediation fails or if parties refuse to, participate in mediation. Gloria, perhaps you can give us maybe like just a rundown of the options available.
Yeah, I'm going to show you some screen grabs, I would say. It will show you how to lodge your claim.
And this would be under the CDRT.
Yes,
the
that's right.
Community Disputes Resolution Tribunal.
Yes, so most of the claims are all online. So what you do is you click on the CDRT, the purple button, and as you can see the live demo. So once you cleared that aspect, now this is interesting because you have a pre-filing checklist. This is important because you will then understand whether you have a claim or not. If you look at the disputes under the neighbor disputes, it's a whole heap of potential claims that a neighbor could file a complaint. So once you've gone through this, and you will have a pre-filing reference number. You could also, if you look at the words in blue, the CJTS step-by-step guide, it gives you all the details, explaining to you how to do it step by step. With this guide, you'll be able to file your application easily, I would say, perhaps maybe taking about 10-15 minutes to file such a claim. And if you have difficulties, you could also read there's a booklet, it's called Guide to Neighbor Disputes Claim. And it will also show you what happens next. Once you file the claim, it will also take you through the process. That will be at page 6 or 7. So this is a step-by-step guide to give you an overview once you have filed a claim.
Perhaps Gloria can share with us what types of cases does the CDRT hear?
All of the legal dispute claims, definitely. And you also have if you have any harassment cases, you can even file it under the profile, or you can even file a distress complaint. Okay. And will lawyers be involved at the CDRT? No, unless you ask for permission. Yeah, so you have to make a request. Okay. But likewise, you can get seek legal advice on this, on how to proceed with the claim. Yes. So if you do not feel, if you feel that maybe it's a bit of a hassle to approach a lawyer, feel free to come to the help center at the state courts. Sure. And I think one thing that people may be curious about is, at what point do you decide to litigate? Can you mediate and litigate at the same time? You have to try CDC mediation first, and if all that fails, and that's when you end up filing a claim, you still have to go through one round of a mediation, I would say. Yeah. So if that fails, that's when the hearing will be given, and you can then proceed with the claim. And so when you say that another round of mediation has to take place, would this be also at CMC, or would it? No, we read at the state courts. So okay, I see. So in a way, parties will be required to go to another round of mediation. Yes. And based on your experience, or both of you, or even perhaps Katherine, when parties come back for remediation, do you think that is helpful, or will parties think that you're just remediating the same issues? You have tried to ventilate this, but it didn't. You didn't get any positive outcome, so they may be reluctant to remediate.
Well, if they come back for the second mediation, I think both parties have some sort realized that there are certain solutions that they want to achieve, and they are just putting it out there to see whether the other party is acceptable to whatever solutions they have. So I think the second time to mediate is probably the success rate could be even higher than the first one. Yeah, I think the break in between actually gave two parties ample time to think and reflect. Because after all, we mentioned that mediation is all voluntary. So when you come, you must come with an open-mindedness, open heart, and open to discussion and exploring solution. Once we have that mindset, then I think a lot of things can be easier when we are exchanging views or talking or exploring possibilities on how this can be done. That's how I see it.
Taking on what Katherine was just said, when any matters come for mediation, you're just hoping that it will be settled, because end of the day, it's a neighbor. You want to be living with your neighbor, not living with a neighbor from hell. Yeah. So unfortunately, there might be cases where, very few cases where the dispute can never be settled at all, even if you have a court order. Yeah. So interestingly, I had one case where the client was 80 years old, completely exhausted all avenues. Even with the court order, he felt that, look, I'm not just going to go after my neighbor for the breach of the court orders. So basically, he was resigned to the fact that, look, maybe the best thing for me to do is to move out. So that's one, I find it sad because it was quite a drastic approach that he has taken. But end of the day, where he was coming from, I'm 80, I want a peace of mind. So that was, I would say, the unsuccessful case.
I mean, that's really unfortunate. And of course, we hope that, it wouldn't reach this stage for any given neighbor dispute. But perhaps you can share with us what kinds of orders the CDRT can make and how that can help neighbors who are facing some kinds of disputes. Like what kind of orders can be made to protect their interests?
Yeah, so there can be several orders. There can be an order for specific performance, asking a neighbor to do a certain thing. Yeah, or maybe if you have, so if you have a noise situation, you could agree that at 10 o'clock 10 p.m. would be the kind of time, or maybe avoid the exam periods and all that, So these are some of the specific orders that we can ask for. Very rarely the court will give what we call an exclusion order, asking a neighbor to leave the premises. Yeah. So this is just one of the examples.
Have you seen an exclusion order being given before? Under what circumstance would it? Because it does sound quite draconian, like quite extreme.
It is. But I think there was something recently in the news where the court felt that, had no choice but to make such an order. Yeah. So personally not, but I heard it in the news. Sure.
How about Katherine? Like, based on your experience, do you think that from what Gloria has shared, whatever outcomes you can get in mediation, is it very much different from what the court can order?
I think the court can order something more drastic, when push comes to shove, right? But of course, at the mediation stage, our responsibility as a mediator is to best use what we have at hand, which is our experience, to help both parties to come to an amicable solution.
And I suppose one of the upsides of going to court would be, as Gloria shared earlier, that if there were to be any breaches of the order, you can go back to court to enforce that order. And perhaps in mediation, that option is not really that available, right?
But it depends on how you couch your agreement. Yeah. So if your agreement, you have a clause that basically say that, look, if I, in the event I breach, it doesn't stop the other side from filing. So, end of the day, it's how the agreement is structured.
Gloria, perhaps you can share, just when you mentioned also that there is an option called magistrate's complaint.
Yes.
So what is the difference between filing a claim in the CDRT for neighbor disputes and pursuing the route of magistrate's complaint?
That is when you feel that you need, it could be quasi-criminal, because you might want to have a specific order in the sense that maybe you're of the view that that offense, the police views it as an offense that is not arrestable, so the police cannot take up that action against the other party. So it gives you the avenue to go and do that. you might have situation where there is a damage to the property. An example would be the case that I had where the altar, the old man had an altar and that was removed. I had another case where a lady had a beautiful plant, money plant that was growing outside her house, and her neighbor was not green fingers. So she basically came in, there was a CCTV, yeah, cut it off. Yeah. Right. Literally cut it off. So she wanted some compensation and she could damage the property. Yeah. So that's when you can file a registration complaint.
I see. And just now you also mentioned an option of POHA, the Protection
Yes.
from Harassment Act.
Yes.
So in what circumstances would that be suitable?
If you feel, you might have a case where your neighbor, every time you come back, maybe at certain hours, your neighbor sort of tails you, and or you feel that your neighbor curses and swears at you, and that's a form of a harassment also. Yeah, so you can pursue a claim on by filing an application under the POHA.
And will you say that people may also commence a claim in the civil courts? When will that be appropriate?
When CMC fails. Yeah.
I see. Okay. But when they file a claim under the new rules of court, there's also a requirement for parties, as I understand, to
Yes,
to
you have to go.
consider amicable resolution. So I
Yes.
think ultimately, it seems like wherever we go, some form of mediation needs to happen at a certain stage. Would you think so?
Yes, not only for civil, for all aspects, I would say even for family matters and all that.
Okay. And perhaps, Katherine, you may want to share on some of the examples that you have seen on how mediation has helped, perhaps in a very specific context. Have parties gone to you where they have tried some kind of like legal aspect, like a legal route, but they decided to go to CMC for mediation?
Well, that will be cases from the magistrate. So we do have parties who came in for the mediation session. And I think many a times we see parties who at the start, you can see their body language. They are not very comfortable. They are not exactly quite happy that they are put in this situation where they have to face the other parties to discuss and finding some solutions that is amicable for both of them to agree upon. So I think it's the process that we see many a times that both parties will come together. Some of the experiences that I had is smoking along the corridor. This is a very touchy topic because the smokers will say that, then where can I smoke? So there's this 3 or 4 bedroom HDB, and the party, one of the party was smoking where the kitchen is. Okay, so HDB setup is where the kitchen is. When you smoke, the smoke will just go right up. And then the party was saying that it smells my clothing. I would prefer him to go to his room, lock the door, and smoke. So you do have disputants suggesting this, and then the respondent will be like, oh, how do you expect me to close my room, with all the windows closed and smoke? I will be, hooked up inside, but then there will be this argument whereby the disputants will be like, since you're smoking, you shouldn't be having me breathing in the third parties, and then you should have just confined it within your room. So at that mediation session, right, I think they have agreed that it doesn't matter where she or he smokes, right? It's just if it's within his compound and with the windows closed, and then that should be all right. So he says that you can still keep your windows open, you can smoke within your living room or sorts. So yeah, this is one of those suggestions. May not be the perfect solution, but at least the neighbors agree. What is important is that the disputants have to agree on what comes out of it. It's not us. Sometimes we may find that, hey, this agreement sometimes seems to be a little bit skewed towards one party also. But I think we as the neutral party should respect both parties' solutions that is offered and put on the table.
It seems like the smoking issue is a very prevalent concern of many people living in high-rise buildings. Gloria, from your experience, have you also, mediated or acted for parties in such a situation, and how did the parties come to any form of resolution?
Usually for such matters, they tend to come to a resolution, because at the end of the day, it's, you have to accept your neighbor. You're staying in a HDB housing, right? And you're not staying in your own private property, like a landed property. So there must be a lot of give and take. So parties tend to try to resolve, because at the end of the day, it's, you want to continue living together.
And I mean, it's technically not illegal for someone to smoke within the own privacy of his house, right?
Yes.
I guess the issue is then when the smoking becomes a nuisance to other neighbors around you. And I mean, we have evidently, when you take a legal route, you are basically deepening the division between you and your neighbors. So I suppose in that sense, a mediation would be like a more suitable option to try to talk things out so that, we can resolve the issue amicably.
Yes.
There are some questions about whether when you go through mediation through the CDRT route, will that be considered a court order? And if so, can that be enforced more easily as compared to a settlement agreement at the CMC?
Yeah, because if you have an agreement and you decide to, put it as captured as a court order, of course, when there's a breach, it would be easy for you to, to get it enforced. Just to, perhaps, follow up with what Katherine has also said about mediation. She did suggest, she did mention that for CMC mediation, everything is basically face-to-face. Yep. But not for some of the mediations most of the mediation I've done for the past 2 years have all been in Zoom. So there's a little bit of a, difference when it comes to having it Zoom and face-to-face.
I think that is really good to know, because some cases might be more suitable for maybe a Zoom mediation where maybe parties don't want to face their neighbors directly, perhaps because the neighbor has always been hurling vulgarities at the person, potentially being a little bit violent. So would you say that the outcomes, Gloria, based on your experience over Zoom mediation, would you say the outcomes are good as well?
I would say yes. I would say yes.
And any specific reasons why you think people may?
Because they don't feel intimidated. Yeah, they feel that, and the control is with the mediator, because the mediator could basically cut, mute them maybe. Yeah. So in a way, having the Zoom session, I would say, brought about quite a number of settlements.
How about from your experience, Katherine?
One of the housekeeping that at the start of the mediation, I would say that respect each other. So try not to shout, try not to shout each other. So you once you put it out at the very beginning, before you start the mediation, parties will tend to respect what each other's space, especially when they are seated in front of a computer. So I think many a times we have set the tone right from the very beginning. There's no shouting, no vulgarities, mute your telephone, no recording. So once that is set, I think it is known, or we will just take it as all the parties will respect what within the boundary that they are not supposed to do anything otherwise. But of course, like I said, when they started telling their side of the story, they get very emotional, and they started their tone get harsher, more severe. So that's when we come in and say that, we understand how you are feeling. So even for mediator, we need to know how to refrain, paragraphing, so that, you will not agitate the other party further.
Yes.
So that's very important. That's very important. You need to make sure that you don't repeat whatever negativity that's coming out from the other party's story. You need to try to tune it in such a way that it doesn't sound that bad in that sense, but still getting the message across. Because after all, they are sitting next to each other, they are able to see and relate. Yeah.
Right.
But sometimes it's good to quickly, if you see that the tensions are running high and there's no way that you are kind of like able to control already, that's when I think a private caucus is always very needy. We will just call for a private caucus. So this gives the angered party some time to cool down. So there is also techniques that experienced mediator will have. see how they are able to look at the situation and act on it.
I think it's good to know that if parties or if you prefer to have a Zoom mediation, that option is available to you. And as long as you reach out to CMC or in a private mediation to the relevant mediation center, this can be arranged, right?
Yes.
Yes, it can be arranged.
Okay, now that we have a better idea of the options available, both mediation as well as the legal route, perhaps it will be useful for us to discuss certain scenarios and specific issues that may arise from these scenarios. So, for example, I think Katherine, you mentioned that noise disturbance is one of the most common issues that neighbors face. So, for example, if your neighbor regularly throws parties or sings karaoke late at night and causes nuisance to you, and when you approach your neighbor, he or she is very defensive and started yelling at you to mind your own business and denies that it is his or her fault, right? That he or she has been causing this noise. Perhaps, Katherine, we can start with you. Based on your experience as a mediator, how would you suggest or advise a person on the receiving end trying to approach that neighbor? How would you advise that they behave when in such a situation?
At the mediation session itself, I will let the disputant describe the disturbance that has caused some grief, and how it has impacted her life or her daily ins and outs, or her family members. So by telling the other party what it had caused her, like distress, sleepless nights, not able to sleep, having palpitation because they have a weak heart or they're not feeling very well. If it's an older couple, aged couple, sometimes usually they will explain that this noise is not just disturbance as what they will call it, but really it causes a little bit of unsettling palpitation that they have for their chronic illnesses or whatsoever. So by saying that, it actually helps the other party who is regularly throwing the parties and karaoke to be empathetic towards what the neighbors are feeling, to empathize that these are an old couple. Maybe it's time that he either reduce the number of sessions or keep that sessions before a certain time frame, or keep it just over the weekend, so that the couple maybe they some solutions that has been out there would be maybe the couple will take a walk outside while the other neighbor can enjoy his karaoke session, but agree at some timing that it will stop, and so therefore the couple will come back and rest for the rest of the night. Yeah. So this is one of a possibility or solution that can be discussed at the table. Yeah. So I think being human, I would like to believe that they are empathetic towards each other. After all, they are staying in the same block. By continuing throwing parties and all that, it's not just going to annoy one particular neighbor. It will probably be annoying like your left, your right, your top floor neighbor, your lower floor neighbors, and then there will be more and more complaints. Yeah, and that is something that you wouldn't want for this particular person who's throwing karaoke sessions.
Gloria, very interesting. Yeah, because what she says is exactly what we have seen also for cases that have come before me. And taking on what you've said, there can be some boundaries drawn, so you agree on maybe exam period or maybe a certain cut off time, or maybe you can also, invite your neighbors, get invited to one of the karaoke sessions.
Or to party.
Yeah.
And do you have any tips that perhaps you can share with our participants on how you can calm a person down when you feel like they're getting a bit agitated, perhaps from both your experience as a mediator, Gloria?
Okay, so assuming that you have a situation where your neighbors are making so much noise and you feel that you want to knock on the door and tell them to stop.
Yes.
But you're hesitating. Maybe a polite way is if you know your neighbor's contact, maybe send a message or maybe put a note under the door if you want to do that. and or maybe knock on the door and offer, you know, a dessert or cake.
Right.
You know, hopefully that will, you know, give them the message. Yeah, in a very subtle way.
And how about specific strategies? Will you say that perhaps because when it comes to noise disturbance, it would probably be late in the night when people are trying to sleep, and people want the noise to stop, right? So perhaps at that point in time, they will try to go do something about it. But would you say maybe a better way would be to do it the next day after the matter, to try to speak to the neighbor? Or based on your experience, like how have you seen people deal with such situations?
Well, if they come back the next day, then the other party may deny.
Right.
So it is better to address the problem immediately.
That's my opinion. It could be different from the disputants, but my opinion would be, you know, many a times, some of the disputants will say that, you know, before even letting me know what happened, a courtesy call or a courtesy knock on my door and tell me that I'm making too much noise. You know, my neighbor went ahead and filed a police report. You know, how can they do that? Can't they just come over and knock gently on my door and tell me that I'm making some noise? I could have lowered my volume. So sometimes it's just a fear. It's everybody, it's just human nature. Like, oh, what happened? Since you're saying karaoke, what happened if you go up? Then you're in the midst of it and then you get aggressive and then I attack, then what happens? So there's also fear involved. So in CMC, right, there's this 5-step focus process to manage this. This is quite interesting, which I think I'll be sharing here. It's a visit yourself constructively. So there is no issue of personal safety involved. Try to resolve the issue yourself amicably instead of calling the police or other government agencies. So this may save the relationship between you and your neighbor, which is very true. And secondly, be objective, separate the problem from the person. So when you knock on the door, you don't just go, hey, you're making too much noise, you know. Rather, you say, oh, sorry, I'm your neighbor, your friendly neighbor downstairs or whatever. You know, I was wondering whether maybe perhaps you can lower the volume down because my kids are trying to sleep. You know, something like that, very simple. So this is try to address the offending behavior using personal attacks. This is the you shouldn't be doing that. Now, another thing is communicate. Listen carefully to what the other party has got to say without the need to defend yourself first. Be mindful of your tone, voice, and choice of words. So many times it's always the body language that tells the other party that you are not happy about what is being spoken of you. The tone, sometimes when you raise a bit louder, it seems like you're yelling, but actually sometimes people have louder voice. By myself, I have a louder voice. So I always come across as very fierce, but actually I'm not. So when it comes to mediation session, I try to lower my tone. So these are some things that you have to be very conscious that you do have these issues, and then you try to control your tone, your volume. Now, understanding. So you have to try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. So you have to empathize, be invested in understanding what is causing their anxiety or frustration. Suggest solution. So instead of engaging a fault-finding loop, move on to find mutually acceptable solution and be prepared to compromise. Now, if all this fails, then you have to file with CMC.
Well, you might have to call 999 for help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do consider mediation.
Yeah, but don't take the bamboo stake and start knocking on your
Yeah,
neighbors.
yeah.
Right.
On
Yes.
the, on the floor. Don't do
Yes,
that.
that's correct.
I think one very important point that Katherine, you mentioned, is to suggest solutions, right? Because sometimes when we go with a problem, and I mean, we may come across as we're blaming. If you say, you know, you're making too much noise, you're smoking and smoke is coming into my window, but people might feel personally attacked. But if you suggest solutions on how to, you know, resolve the matter, and maybe there can be some brainstorming to come to like something agreeable. So maybe that can be a starting point to having your little negotiation even before going to the CMC. Yeah. And thanks, Katherine, for sharing the ways in which we can approach our neighbors to kind of show our displeasure without sounding hostile. So I think moving to a related point, we always know that in preparation of a mediation or, you know, if you go to the CDRT with a claim, you would require some kind of evidence or supporting documents to support your claim. And these supporting documents, more often than not, would include, like, for example, recordings that you mentioned, police reports, maybe some CCTV recordings or whatnot, right? And I think many people have they would want to know at what point in time should you involve the police on a certain matter, because not all matters are arrestable offenses, right? So perhaps Gloria, you can give us your view on when people should actually reach out to police, maybe in preparation of a claim that they may have.
I mean, just like what Katherine explained earlier on, try to do the focus options. Yeah. And failing which, sometimes you feel that, look, I don't want to escalate things, but approach your neighborhood police force, because sometimes a friendly call from the police does help the situation. We have seen situations where the clients come back and say, look, I think my matter is now resolved because my neighbor has stopped my neighbors having nonsense about that. But I'm not saying that for all matters, please go call the police. Try to evaluate first. If you feel, hesitant, you're not sure what to do, go to perhaps the hub center, get some basic legal advice first, or go to the legal clinics and then, evaluate your situation.
Would you say it's appropriate for people to be taking video recordings or audio recordings in such circumstances? Gloria, what do you think?
I think it's quite normal for people to take it, but I think one shouldn't cross the line because you don't want to have the other party file a claim of doxing against you. Because some people, when they feel aggrieved, they tend to go to social media, start name and blame and shame the other party. So you've got to be very careful with what you do when you get such evidence.
I think there are some of our participants who are curious to find out about how they can get the relevant recordings if, say, it is inappropriate or illegal for them to be installing CCTVs at, for example, their doorstep. So this would probably be an issue where you have obstruction in your common corridor, or where your neighbor sweeps their dirt from their side of the corridor to in front of your house. How would they be able to gather that that evidence if, say, there are no like CCTV recordings, but at the same time it is probably illegal. It is legal for people to be installing CCTV at their doorstep.
Oh, yes, if it's outside the door. So you might probably have to angle your CCTV in such a way that is, just in your windows, or maybe on, inside your grills. Yeah,
I see. So that would be a creative solution, right?
Yeah. Yes. Another option is to get permission from the town council.
Right. And would you have to file a police report first with some kind of evidence before you can go to your town council?
You can lodge a police report to say that this is what you want to do. Yeah. As I said, sometimes the neighborhood police post will give a call to the neighbors, hoping that you don't have to go to the extra mile to do things, and that will help to resolve the issues. But assuming that maybe there was no phone call and you have no choice, then you might have to file a magistrate's complaint to compel the police to perhaps reveal some other, if there's other CCTV footage.
I see. Oh, yes. Katherine,
I think there's a time cutoff for noise in the HDB area, in the HDB building. I think it's 10 or 10:30. All noise has to stop. Whether you are renovating, you are switching on radio loudly, that has got to stop. So I think many times parties tend to think that if I call the police, he will never know who's the caller. Now, if it's loud enough, you probably will do that because, he will never guess who, left, right, upstairs, downstairs, or all that. So after a certain timing, I think some of them usually would not go up, or because assuming it gets a bit aggressive because it's quite late in the evening and somebody gets hurt. So that's when they will involve the police by asking them to have a look at the neighbors, it's too much noise coming out from that unit.
And I think a lot of people are also very curious about how to gather evidence, right? So we have a lot of questions coming in on that. Like, for example, how do you actually get your neighbor to admit that they are the ones causing the noise? or how do you actually make, even if you make an audio recording of the noise, how would you prove that it was your neighbor who made it? I suppose, this goes a little bit to the evidence that you bring to mediation or bring to court. Just based on your experience, perhaps Katherine, have you seen how people have dealt with this issue?
Yes, they come in recording sound. Okay. It's very difficult to identify where the sound is coming from, especially if you are residing in a HDB building. Sometimes the sound comes from upstairs, sometimes it comes from downstairs, but you mistakenly think that it's coming from upstairs because it sounds like it's coming from upstairs. Now, I personally experienced this before. I heard howling of chili, but it didn't come from my upstairs unit. It actually came from downstairs. So similarly, there are some instances that you cannot really put your finger to it that this is definitely your neighbors upstairs is causing this problem. So it is very difficult to prove that whatever you are recording, the sound is indeed coming from upstairs. Now, when you talk about video, then of course, by a person's action, then it becomes very clear who is the culprit who's doing that. Right? How we usually settle is if the other party is guilty of doing so, they will prefer not to look at the evidence. Then as a mediator, you can ask, oh, is there any reason why you are uncomfortable? This will prove your innocence. You're not the one doing it, And it is all about how you try to talk to your disputants and try to convince your disputants that there is indeed an issue right here and you could be the culprit and you have to own up to it, and then we can move the discussion forward to settle this for you. Because if you don't do so, then the situation gets worse and snowball to a stage whereby probably a magistrate complaint will definitely be filed and you'll be legally implicated in some way. So we usually, for mediation, we don't threaten, but what we do is we tell them that, look, you have a neighbor that is already showing us certain evidence. You refuse to look at it. So is there any way that you can tell us why? And usually, sometimes from this point onwards, you realize that there's some underlying issues. Some would gladly look at the evidence because they say that, I'm not aware that my unit is causing so much noise because I do have a family that has I think 7 kids. Yeah, ranging from the eldest to the youngest. And we couldn't put the finger to it because she was mentioning that the elder children all went to school already, left with the younger children. But at some point they admitted that 1 or 2 of their kids may make a lot of stopping noises. So that was mitigated by placing carpet throughout the entire floor. So I think sometimes it's looking at how willing the neighbors are to mitigate that noise level. May not terminate all the noise, but at least help with the noise level. So I think that is also a solution.
Yeah, and it seems like it requires parties to do a little bit of investigation as well to determine exactly the cause of the issue. And from your experience, Gloria, is that the same?
No, I was about to share a personal experience because during COVID time we needed to keep ourselves entertained, right? So we got ourselves a cat, and she has this habit of middle of the night throwing things, and she likes to throw things into the bathtub. So we didn't realize that it caused a sound loud enough to bother the neighbor downstairs. And so the neighbor came, she rang the bell, and she said, this has been going on for a few days, can you tell me why this is happening? So I said, is it because of a cat? We got a cat. And then it turns out to be she's a cat lover. So she said, I think I have a solution for you. Why not you put a piece of like a bag, on top on the bathtub itself during nighttime. So in case if your cat pushes anything, it doesn't cause any sound. And since thereafter, she didn't come back to me.
Right.
So it's, she herself decided that, to give me a solution.
Okay. So that's a good example of how, communication and solutions would be. But of course, now we're talking about all well and good where people are willing to communicate. But we know of people who, like neighbors from hell who really do not want to engage and communicate. In that case, would you say I mean, Gloria, would you say that the legal filing a claim would be the only way to go
Yeah,
through?
it would definitely be inevitable, I would say.
When you feel like you can't
Yeah, when
communicate.
you have exhausted all avenues.
And I think on that note, perhaps we can consider some of the questions brought from the floor. These are a bit more specific questions, but I think one common thread that we have from these questions would be, what if, so we have been talking about what if you meet an aggressor or somebody who comes to you to express that they feel that you have been creating noise or whatnot. But what if you're on the receiving end? Somebody comes to you and accuses you of like making certain noises or whatnot when you feel like you have not done it and the person is being unreasonable. Have you, both of you, seen any of such cases? Maybe Katherine at mediation, and how was that resolved?
Yes, I've seen quite a number of them. So sometimes they are totally unaware that they have created such noises because they say it's not possible because the entire day my whole family is not around. So we have mysteries like this all the time. This is sometimes quite annoying because it's like, what's happening because whole time he's not around, and the other person is very adamant that no, somebody is in your house. So it came to the stage whereby this gentleman said that, why don't we do this? Every time you hear a noise, I give you my mobile number, call me, and both of us will investigate together. So you do have neighbors who's understanding enough to go to that length to help find out what is the root of the issue. Like I said, in the HDB dwelling, right, it's very difficult to locate noise because I physically run a building back at my old workplace. So experience tells me that sometimes noise traveling from some place doesn't necessarily mean that it's from upstairs or from a place that you think that it is from that person. Noise travels, right? So it is quite difficult to put a finger to it. So usually when I am the receiving end, that I'm adamant that no, it's definitely not me, because I know for a fact from Monday to Friday, 9 to 6, or rather 7 to 8, nobody is at home. But my neighbor saying that 3 to 5 o'clock every day, there's marbles dropping on the floor, there is dragging of chairs. It's definitely not me. So if I am sincere enough, I said, you know what? Why don't you come and have a look? Not on my door. I leave the windows open or the side windows open. You can have a look. There's nobody there. You know, and it's always happening in the living room. It's not the bedroom. So it can't be possibly that we're hiding in that room. So yeah, so this is what happened. There's a lot of many mystery that sometimes cannot be resolved because there's no such thing. Yeah.
So I had one case where the party actually offered me, I have a CCTV because I needed to monitor my children and all that. So you can look at that.
Willing to share the footage, right? And that worked out.
It worked out because the neighbor was trying to, to ensure that that they could settle this dispute.
I mean, it's quite unfortunate that when you feel like you have not done anything, but somebody comes and accuses you of something. But in this situation, I suppose the way to go about is to, in a way, prove your innocence.
Yes.
And work together with your neighbor, if you must, to try to find what is the issue that is bothering him or her.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And we have another question on perhaps people may not be aggressive, but what if they're passive aggressive in a certain way? So when they may have some misunderstanding, and whenever you walk past, they will shout vulgarities at you. There was no physical harm, but just calling you names and whatnot. Have you seen cases like that, Gloria? And what can be done about this?
Yes, I've seen. Yeah. So, I mean, usually when the cases come to me, they would have seriously failed at CMC.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so what I would do suggest is, look, if you can, send a letter, demand, try to resolve it. But if you can't, miss, and if you have to file a claim, then no choice. Yeah. Yeah. So, we have seen such cases.
And this would be under the Protection of Harassment Act. Would this be considered some kind of harassment already?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is.
Right. Even if you feel like that they're yelling at you or making you fear for your safety in that sense.
Correct, because it's ongoing. And
Okay.
usually what happens is, sometimes if it crosses the line, Yeah, if it didn't cross the line, they could even get an expedited order, and that would help them, give them a bit of a peace and security
Right.
until the matter is finalized.
So now we know that if you face such a situation, perhaps you should consult a lawyer to look at the legal options available. Yeah. And so we have been discussing, you know, HDB or like a condo kind of housing arrangement. How about landed property? So there is a question that came in that said that, oh, you know, my neighbor always parks in front of my gate, like in the landed property. Is this something that would be suitable for mediation? Have you seen something similar, perhaps, Gloria?
Not really, but I think it would be more suited for.
Katherine?
Would it qualify the CMC?
I have not mediated a case where it's landed property yet.
I see. So you would say
Yeah.
that most disputes are in high-rise
Yes,
buildings.
I think it is still pretty similar to shoe cabinets that is near to the neighbor's door. That is also annoyance for some disputants. Like, this is my area, you put your shoe cabinet just right next to my steps up to my door. So yeah, for those, yes, we do have quite a number of them. So we try to come up with solutions and all that. Most of the time, I don't know whether is it just very lucky for me or whatsoever. They are quite willing to move the shoe cabinet towards the side, because then there will be pictures shown. You know, this is my area, this is your area, and then this gentleman will say that, you know, I have nowhere to put my shoe cabinet. This is a corner. I have no choice but to put here. If I move a bit slightly further, would that be okay? You know, things like that. Because by the time they escalated to mediation, right, they have potted plants everywhere already just to keep the shoe cabinet away. So it's not very wise, because when it comes to fire escape and all that, everybody will be implicated. You know, there's no leeway to escape from fire if it happens, and especially if it's like combustible things like these, right? So so sometimes as a mediator, I will highlight certain danger or hazardous situations to them, so that they are able to relate and kind of like relent on certain things that they want.
Sure. And I guess in the landed property example, the same argument could be made. Like, if there is some kind of danger and your car is parked in front of someone else's house, they may have some issues with getting out of the house. I mean, it is really inconvenient when that's the only way where the car can come out, right?
Yeah.
And although you may not have experienced such a matter, but would you say that such a scenario would also be something that CMC can handle and something that can be mediated?
Yes, it can be. It can be
Yeah.
mediated.
That's for sure. It's just that I'm not being assigned
Yeah, sure.
a particular case.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We do have cases from landed properties. Yes, we
Right.
do have that.
So Gloria,
Especially the tree encroaching, right?
yes, exactly. There is a question on
Yeah.
tree encroaching and saying that, you know, that their neighbor basically is continuously asking them to trim the branches that have been like going into the property. And we have seen on the news that such matters have actually caused you know, gone to become like very difficult legal disputes.
Yeah,
and
you even have the neighbors, you know, trying to trim the other neighbors
yeah,
without their consent.
sure. So Gloria, what do you think can be done in
So
this
so there
situation?
must be understanding between parties. They can try to work it out. Yeah, either you agree to basically trim that particular branch maybe once every 6 months. You can agree to do that. Yeah, or you can also agree to offer to pay, you know, for the services, so that you know, parties can continue to live harmoniously.
That I recall, I did mediate one landed property, but it's not about obstruction. It's about dogs barking in their premises.
Right.
So it has come to a point whereby it's day and night barking next door, and they just moved in for like 7-8 months. So that's when the aggrieved party was like, enough is enough, you know, morning to night. And the owners totally were not aware, because when the owners were at home, the dogs were quiet. But when the owners left for work in the morning or they come back really very late, the dogs will start barking relentlessly. So I guess it could be well, the
the couple was very apologetic that dogs, because I think it's not just one, I think it's 3 dogs. So I think they were very apologetic and all that. Then they said that give them some time. They tried to resolve it by maybe not enough food. They didn't come back on the right timing, so the dog didn't have their food. So they said they will be more aware, and the husband even suggested to put the dog in daycare because landed property. So like put in the daycare to mitigate the afternoon noise. So I think that outcome was pretty good because there were so many solutions out on the table. But there was also underlying issues because then because of the dog barking, the wife of the parties actually start how should I put it, the tone, I would say calling out names was very mumbling when the wife came back, and they didn't know until the case was filed that it was actually their dogs.
Right.
Yeah, so actually you help mend the relationship between 2 neighbors.
Yeah. And this shows exactly how communication is so important, and for parties to come to the table to actually discuss about what is going on.
Yes.
So we are mindful about the time, and given the time, we have to bring the Q&A session to a close. But before we end, I would like to invite each of our speakers to share one key takeaway from this session that our participants can, remember. So perhaps let's begin with Gloria.
Just as the word mediation, with the words mediate, it starts with the letter ME. So I take it that anything that you do, remember that it's about me that who can mediate, me is the one that who can come up with a solution. So just remember the word is mediation, with the letter ME being very predominant.
Right. So you have to start with yourself and going with the framework that Katherine has suggested, being calm, being objective, and providing solutions. And I think that is very true, and that is very good advice there, Gloria. Katherine, how about yourself?
Okay, focus is the word for the takeaway.
Yeah.
But on top of that, I think it is about listening here. You need to empathize what the other party has said, be objective, not to bring any negativity. Be very aware of your tone and body language. Just stay cool for a while, take a moment and try to see what the other party has got to say. I think that helps a lot. Just take a breather, for maybe 2-3 seconds. It will help.
Thank you very much, Katherine and Gloria, for your invaluable insights today, and for taking your time out to share your experience. I think the anecdotes are really very interesting and would really relate. A lot of people can relate to such situations. And we hope that you found our discussion to be very useful. And at the end of the webinar, a survey will pop up on your screen for your completion. We appreciate your comments as it would be used to help to improve our future webinars. And there are many more webinars as part of the Law Awareness Weeks at CDC 2022. Please scan the QR code or visit the website to find out more about the other webinars. And if you would like to have legal advice on any specific legal issue, and if you're keen to register for a legal clinic session, you may write to enquiry@lawsocprobono.org. So really, thank you, Gloria and Katherine, for this very insightful session. We now know that other than all the self-help remedies that you have, going to the police or going to your MCST or your town council, you can also pursue mediation as an option. And the process of doing so would be quite simple. You apply on the website at a $5 fee. And if all else fails, mediation fails, or parties don't want to sit at the mediation table, you can have legal options. And in that case, you should, or you may consider going to a lawyer for further advice. And with that, we would like to thank all of you for joining us today, and have a good week ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.